Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging. Apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business. Talking about the sexualized culture that we're in and how to really address sexual purity, maybe what we can do to address everything from parenting issues to justice issues. And we bring back to the microphone some good friends of the ministry, Noel Bouche, who is the president of Purehope. And also we're going to be talking with his director of parenting ministry. But Noel, thank you for joining us today here on Point of View.
Hey, Kerby, great to be with you again, and as always, thanks for bringing us on the show.
Well, appreciate the good work that you do. We have links to your website, and we're going to be talking about opportunity for people to know more about a film that you're producing and some of the great resources. But let me also bring to the microphone today Dan Martin. He's the Director of Parenting Ministry there at Purehope. And Dan, I appreciate you joining us as well.
Thank you, Kerby. It's great to be with you and looking forward to today's discussion.
Well, we're going to spend some time over this next hour really giving you a number of very practical suggestions about what you can do in your life and ministry, how you can get involved. And certainly we have a lot of activists. But Noel, if you would, maybe spend just a little bit of time once again reminding our listeners about the tremendous ministry that Purehope has been. You have been part of a legacy that came before you, but you've done a great job of taking this ministry in a very profound and important way. But give us a little bit of the history and talk about some of the things we're going to be addressing today in this hour.
Well, thanks, Kerby. It's a privilege to do so. It is a tremendous ministry, and I've been blessed to be a part of it now for 5 years, which is part of its 30-year history. We were founded in 1983. And, the focus in the 80s was a little different because the 80s were a different decade. We had a different culture, different kind of landscape at that point. We've seen things become more pornified, more sexualized, and that's where we focused, is really equipping the church to be a light in this culture and in this darkened world. But to do that, we've got to live in the holiness of Christ. And so that's what we focus on at Purehope. Our vision is a world free of sexual exploitation and brokenness, and we work towards that every day. With hope and with courage and with certainty, because the Bible promises that He's going to come and redeem all things, and He's actually redeeming them even now. Even as the darkness increases, He's building His kingdom, and He's starting in us, and even in our own brokenness and woundedness. And so we really focus on equipping the church to live this life of purification and holiness out by providing Christian solutions in a sexualized culture. And so every day, our team across the country works on getting people equipped in the local church, Christian schools and academies, parents, college students, to pursue the love, purity, and justice of Jesus, which is increasingly difficult in a mobile age, in a digital age where we're torn apart as families and our attention is distracted and content is thrown at us that is contrary to Scripture, contrary to God's design for us. And so we're really working every day to give people hope, because we think, pursuant to 1 John 3:3, that it's in the hope in Jesus that we're purified and healed. And so we love to do that in our parenting ministry, in our justice ministry, in our recovery ministry. We think those are the three legs of the stool that the church really needs to focus on here in the 21st century to find healing and to bring that healing to others.
Well, again, the justice ministry I want to talk to you about in particular because of your law background. Parenting ministry, we're going to talk with Dan about that, and I think all of us will talk about the recovery. And Dan, since we're just getting to meet you for the first time, let's talk about that, because you focus on developing Purehope's parenting ministry activities and resources, really working to cultivate partnerships with churches around the country. And so I want our listeners for just a few minutes to learn a little bit more about this parenting ministry, because it is something that is so necessary given the fact that young people at very young ages encounter pornography in ways that are very different than those of us that are a little bit older around the table.
Yeah, Kerby, the Noel mentioned just living in a digital age, how that has kind of changed the game. And I think for parents, our goal with our parenting ministry is really to equip parents, to equip their kids, not just to live in a sexualized culture, but to thrive in a sexualized culture. And so we've really focused our efforts on ways that we can come around parents and equip them. I grew up in a Christian home like probably many of the listeners, and this is just a subject that was not talked about in my home.
Oh, so yeah,
this is a subject that I think my parents and many other parents just did not feel equipped and prepared to have conversations like this, and so much of what we do is trying to help parents just begin the dialogue, begin the conversation, and it's this idea that sex and sexualized culture and pornography are such big issues to bring up with our kids. So many of us don't do that, and to some degree we don't do that because we don't feel equipped, but we also have maybe some hang-ups that we have about our own past and our own failures in this area.
I was going to pick that up because one of the reasons we don't talk about sex is maybe because it's uncomfortable, and I know you have a parenting resource, and you've even done some webinars recently on that. We'll get to that in just a minute. So some maybe are afraid to talk about it because they've never had that role model. Others are afraid to talk about it because they said, I really probably didn't have the best testimony in the 60s, 70s, or 80s, and here I'm raising my kids now. But I think you can really share some of your failures and some of the warnings, because as we've pointed out on this program, if you're talking about, say, somebody in the 1960s, we'll talk about a baby boom parent or something like that. Well, back then there were maybe 2 sexually transmitted diseases. Both of them are curable. Now we have more than 30 sexually transmitted diseases. Some are not curable. Some are even lethal. So the stakes are even higher. And I think young people can learn from our mistakes. But as you point out, Dan, sometimes we're afraid to even talk about that with our kids, and we're not putting them in the best situation for the circumstances they're going to find themselves in the 21st century.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I think, Kerby, that talking about our past, talking about mistakes, give us an opportunity to point our kids to the redemptive work of Christ in this area of our lives. We have adopted terminology in the church that when we talk about sexual purity, when we talk about purity, we automatically think, oh, the abstinence talk, or the virginity talk. What we as Christian parents have the opportunity to do is really to equip our kids, not just for the period of time leading up to marriage. So many parents would use the language of, boy, I just want my kids to stay pure until marriage. And really what we want to do at Purehope is kind of change that dynamic. We want to change that thought to, it's not just this period before marriage. I want to equip my kids to pursue purity for the rest of their lives. Even if they mess up, even if they stumble along the way, I still want my kids to recognize the grace that's available, and also the fact that we pursue purity. We don't become pure. That'll happen one day, but purity is not something we can lose. It's something we can gain because of what Christ has done for us.
Very good. Let's take a break, and when we come back, we're going to continue our conversation today as we talk about parenting, justice, recovery with Purehope. We have links to it on our website. We have some great resources that we think you should contact them about and obtain and use in your family and church. So stay tuned. We'll talk with them more right after these messages.
The Point of View Commentary with Kerby Anderson.
Over the last few years, there have been a number of attacks on our nation's national motto, "In God We Trust." Recently, I had Representative Randy Forbes on my program to talk about these attacks and the victories that often we haven't heard about on most of the mainstream media. A few years ago, a bureaucrat at the Department of Veterans Affairs attempted to ban the flag-folding recitations at military funerals. This phrase was considered inappropriate and unconstitutional. May God grant you grace, mercy, and peace. A funeral home was told by government officials they could not even inform the families that they have the option of requesting prayer at the military services performed by the Veterans Honor Details. The U.S. Mint attempted to remove the inscription, "In God We Trust," from the front of the new presidential coin. The traditional inscriptions of "E Pluribus Unum" and "In God We Trust" were moved to the edge of the coins. The architect of the Capitol refused a teenager's request that a certificate noting his grandfather's love of God, country, and family accompany a souvenir flag that had been flown over the building. The 17-year-old Eagle Scout was told that the word God could not be put on the certificate because it violated a policy banning religious and political expressions on the certificates. Fortunately, in each of these cases, the policies were changed. Representative Forbes even commented that it was good that people on radio were hearing about these victories because they're rarely reported in the media. He then went on to mention another victory. Last month, the Supreme Judicial Court of Massachusetts upheld the constitutionality of the phrase, under God, in the Pledge of Allegiance. There have been at least 3 failed attempts to challenge under God in the pledge. There's sure to be additional challenges, but for now, the phrases like, one nation under God, and in God we trust, appear secure. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
And once again, as we talk with our friends from Purehope Ministries, Noel Bouche is the president of Purehope, and Dan Martin is the director of parenting ministry. And for just a minute, before we get back to parenting, I want to talk about the broader issue that parents struggle with, and that is role models. Both of you were college athletes. Noel, I've mentioned before that you were the quarterback of the South Dakota State University football team, but Dan, you were a pitcher for your college as well, VCU. And so when you think about sports figures today, there used to be a time when our sports heroes were really good role models. There are still a few out there, but the sad reality is if I'm looking for a positive role model for my son as he was growing up, I probably did not look to professional sports or even college sports because, unfortunately, there are a lot of individuals that are really bad role models, and I think that's one of the real challenges for parents today, don't you think?
Mm-hmm. I agree with you, and it's one of the reasons Dan will speak to this, why in our parenting ministry we're constantly talking to parents about, A, it's not just a one-time talk, it's an ongoing dialogue, but B, it's what you do. It's what your kids see you doing that matters. What are you consuming in terms of content? What are you saying? How are you treating others? Are you pursuing with your whole heart the Lord and the purity that is found in Him, or are you objectifying others? Because kids will see that, whether it's children my age who are young or Dan's who are graduating from high school and college. It's about modeling it ourselves. And, you mentioned historically, I guess I'm old enough at this point, I kind of remember those days, Kerby. And I think, though, the danger in that is sometimes we assume something about a person. We also assume something about an image that really doesn't give a young person especially the whole picture. We live in an image-driven culture. And there are a few, you mentioned athletes, there's a few athletes out there who are using it as a platform. They're using their fame, they're using their success and their skills as a platform to proclaim the good news and the gospel and their relationship and faith and hope in Jesus Christ. But even that, when you're watching that on a screen or you're hearing that in an arena, you're not getting a full dimensional picture of that person. A young person is not relating to that person. And those are the most important things that a young person is going to experience is a fully orbed human relationship. And, of course, the closest is going to be with their parents and siblings, and then people who are real, full, whole people in their lives. That's what you end up modeling. That's why Scripture says bad company corrupts good character. It's the people who you're actually with. Now, without question, the content you're consuming has an effect. because we're learning. Every time we're watching or listening to something, we're learning, and our beliefs and our attitudes and our values are being formed. But when we're watching those around us who are modeling a pursuit of holiness and saying no to certain things, which is part of the sanctification process, that affects you. I mean, when I was an athlete, you mentioned it, so I'll go back to the glory days. I don't like to talk about it too often, or Bruce Springsteen starts playing in my mind. But we watched film all the time.
Yes.
I mean, playing football, and especially as a quarterback, you watch film all the time, and you're looking at a couple things. One, you're looking at your upcoming opponent, and you're trying to understand their tendencies, their tactics, and preparing for how you're going to respond to it. Secondly, though, you're watching yourself, and you're reviewing practice film, game film. You're watching what you did correctly so you can really solidify that habit, and then you're also watching the things that were off so you can correct it. And that is so important. I mean, I remember growing up as a kid, I would watch, in my case, quarterbacks play who I felt like they kind of matched up with my skill set and my game, and I kind of had some affinity for them. I would watch film and highlights, and pretty soon, because I watched probably too much of it at some points, I would start to see myself doing the same thing. I would start to see myself making the same moves. I would start to see the same throwing motion developing. And so for me, that's just an example, as a parent now and as a citizen and as a son of God, that what we're consuming, what we're watching, is going to start having an impact. So whether we're watching those in our lives who are pursuing Christ, we're going to start becoming imitators of them one way or another. If we're watching porn, and that's our model, we're going to start adopting those values. If we're watching movies that are communicating objectification and violence, we're going to start to see that creeping in. And so the most important place is the home for that. And I'll let Dan speak to that, because he was also an athlete, although he was just a pitcher.
Yeah.
He didn't have to put on pads at any point. But same type of thing.
I want to know how fast he pitched, what his fastball and his curve and his slider look like. But Dan, let's talk about that for a minute, because Noel set the table. The modeling that we do as parents is crucial. Yeah. I think values are more caught than taught, and it seems to me that we certainly, and in your parenting resource, you have some tips on how to talk to your kids about sex, how to model a life of purity for your kids. Talk about what that means.
Yeah, and we have a threefold strategy in that parenting curriculum. The threefold strategy, quickly, is just protect, equip, and then that last piece is model. I say so often to parents, when it comes to protecting and equipping our kids, those are two things that we need to be doing simultaneously. We need to protect them from things, but we need to be equipping them for. And I have 3 grown kids now, and I say this all the time to young parents, is I'd much rather send equipped kids out into the world than protected kids. Mm-hmm. And those are important things to be doing simultaneously. We can try to build a bubble around our kids, but in this environment, in this culture, we just can't do that. We have to not only protect them but equip them. But that model piece is so important. And I'll just tell you a quick story to kind of maybe make the point here. When my oldest son now, who's a junior in college now, also a college athlete, mm-hmm. When he was leaving for college, he had gotten a laptop for graduation. And I'll never forget, right before he left for college, he brought that laptop to me, and he said, "Hey, Dad, would you put that program, that accountability program, on my laptop that you have on your computer?" And that, Kerby, for me, was just a reinforcement of he's been watching. He's been watching me. He knows what I've done, and have I modeled for him what it looks like
That's just incredible.
To pursue purity. I get choked up when I tell that story. Have I modeled for him what it looks like to pursue purity?
That's such a great story. Oh, it's great, great. And if nothing else, we like to hear parents who've been successful. So your testimony means a great deal, and certainly one I hope that a lot of our listeners would model. We're coming to a break, but just before we do so, talk about some of the resources that are in the parenting section of Purehope, because I know you've had a webinar in the past, you've had a parenting in a sexualized culture resource, and as people go to your website, tell us about how they might be able to use those resources to be more effective as a parent.
Yeah, that Parenting in a Sexualized Culture resource, by the way, parents can go on our website and download it for free. It's a great resource. It's a 4-part resource. Part 1 is the foundation, teaching your kids God's design and purpose for sex. Part 2 is the conversation, how to build ongoing dialogue with your kids about sex. Part 3 is technology, how to develop a technology strategy in your home. And then Part 4 is what we call the legacy. How do we leave a godly legacy in our home? We also in there have a talking points guide for parents, age-appropriate talking points. We have additional resources, other ministries, other websites that parents can go to find additional information. I would encourage every parent to download that resource. It's free on our website.
Well, again, it's something we encourage you to go to the website and find out a little bit more. We have it linked there. Of course, you can go to Purehope directly. We have those links, and I would encourage you to find out more about the parenting in a sexualized culture. When we come back, we're going to spend some time talking about justice and recovery. We've just barely scratched the surface, but want to also remind you that we're coming to the end of our fiscal year. It ends June 30th, and I thought it would be good once again to remind ourselves of the fact that we are dependent upon your financial gifts to bring these programs to you, and we really need to end our financial year on a strong financial footing.
When a person has faith in God and believes he is responsible to him, that faith creates virtue. Virtue causes people to willingly obey the law. When the internal control of virtue is diminished, the outside control of government must increase to restrain the people. As government control increases, freedom decreases. As the power of government grows stronger, faith in a power higher than the government becomes an enemy of the state. The government will then seek to restrain faith to increase its power, and the cycle goes on and on. Will you help Point of View equip people to make faith an active part of their lives? Our fiscal year end is around the corner, and it's critical that we end the month of June with a solid financial foundation. A few of our key partners have generously created a $25,000 matching fund. So when you give during this critical time, your gift will be matched up to $25,000. I ask you to join us in this important work that God has called Point of View to do. Together, we can make a powerful difference.
Encouraging you to join with us today. You can go to the website, which is where you're going to find out more about Pure Hope, but also a way in which you can join with us. You can click on that button in the middle there that says double your donation now. We have a matching fund of $25,000 on the table, and that is a way in which your gift to Point of View can be doubled. And you can give online by going to pointofview.net, or of course you can also write a check out to Point of View and send it to Point of View, Post Office Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221. Again, you might ask yourself, where else do I hear these kinds of programs? As we talk about sexual purity, we give you very specific and concrete steps that you can take to be a better parent, things that we can do to stand for justice, as we'll talk about in just a minute. So visit our website, pointofview.net. We'll take a break and come back with our conversation with these two men right after this.
You are listening to Point of View. For materials offered during the program, please write to Point of View, Post Office Box 30. That's Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221. Zip 75221, or call our toll-free number 1-800-347-5151. That's 1-800-347-5151. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. Point of View will continue after this.
leader of at least...
With all my life, let your glory shine down. Let your glory shine down.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
Privileged to have with us today Noel Bouche, president of Purehope, as well as Dan Martin, who is the director of parenting ministry. We've talked a little bit about parenting. We're going to focus this time on justice and recovery. We've only mentioned one of many very good resources from Purehope, so take the time to follow each one of those, because I think you're going to find these helpful. And just as I talk with Dan about parenting, Noel, I'd like to talk with you for just a few minutes about the justice ministry. As I mentioned before, not only a graduate of South Dakota State University, but also of the University of Texas School of Law. And one of the elements you've really brought to Purehope is a focus on dealing with such issues as sexual trafficking, the porn culture, and the impact that's having. And I appreciate the fact that you have joined arms, linked arms, and other individuals with ministries that are dealing with this issue, because after all, when you talk about pornography, you talk about individuals who are being victimized by pornography, and talk a little bit about the justice outreach that you have there at Purehope.
Yeah, well, thanks, Kerby. I appreciate, we've talked about this, your sense of that and how important this discussion is, because we do think, obviously, it's one of our three streams, as it were, at Purehope, parenting, justice, and recovery. But I think we've had very rich conversations around the reality of the levels of exploitation that exist and how they come together. Things like porn, things like sex trafficking and forced prostitution. And, you mentioned I went to law school. When God was directing my steps personally towards law school, one of the things he was using was this vision and the understanding I was acquiring of the level of injustices that exist in the world, and how people, in the millions are kept in sexual slavery across the globe. And when I first was exposed to it, I thought that happened in places like Thailand and India exclusively, and went to law school thinking I was going to take that degree, get a plane ticket, and go save the world by restoring and freeing victims and putting the bad guys in jail. Well, that's part of it. That's part of it. There needs to be an enforcement of laws, and we're strengthening our laws in this country as it relates to human trafficking. But there's also cultural roots that create these injustices. And as I got into it more, started to realize that, wow, this trafficking of women and children, boys, even in some cases men, doesn't just happen abroad. It happens right here in the U.S. It happens in all of our cities. And by the way, it's not just these forms of exploitation that are happening. It's things like the grooming and cultivation of attitudes that is occurring all around us. And that's through media. That's through other forms of content that's coming at us. So one of the things at Purehope we're trying to do is connect these dots for people. And more, I think, eyes are being open to this. Just last year, the State Department, in its annual trafficking report, said, in essence, hey, government can't do everything. Mm-hmm. Now, just let that sink in for a second, that the State Department admitted government can't do anything. They actually said, to end commercial sex and exploitation in this realm, we need parents, we need ministers, we need civic leaders to be modeling and changing culture that says, hey, boys will be boys, and it's okay to do this and objectify women. That's what it's going to take. And that's why, as we talked about parenting in the first half hour, it dovetails and leads right into this justice discussion. This is everyone's job. It's not just for specialists like lawyers and social workers to be opposing human trafficking. It's for all of us to be raising this discussion, specifically talking about how things like porn production, which is based globally right there in Southern California, is a form of sex trafficking under our federal laws. That's an eye-opener. It was for me, and I see it changing, discussions all around the country. So, again, we do that through special events, through conferences, working with law enforcement across the country, creating Bible studies that are impacting not just families and young people, but also victims of exploitation, women who are coming out of prostitution. I know one undercover police officer working through our Justice Bible study in the area. And so it's wonderful to see people's eyes being open to the fact that my pursuit of purity and love is an act of justice. And for me, that's where it starts every day as a parent and as an individual.
Let's, if we can, for just a minute, highlight again that Pure Justice Journey, because it's a small group Bible study. I might also mention for anybody that might want to join with you next year, internships are available. You have a lot of ways in which listeners can connect up in this justice area. Talk about those if you might.
Yeah, I'd love people to engage with our Justice Bible Study because it really does open our eyes to what justice is. You know, when I went to law school, I thought that I was going to learn all about it. It turns out I didn't really learn about it until coming into ministry, because then I learned, per Psalm 89, that God's throne is founded on righteousness and justice, steadfast love, and faithfulness. And it's interesting because those four virtues line up exactly with Hosea 2 when he says, I will betroth you to me in righteousness and justice, steadfast love, and faithfulness. And so for me, what I realized was that this justice thing is a virtue first, and really, ultimately, it's rooted in the sexual union. Because I'm either going to treat someone justly or unjustly. As a married man, I'm either going to be walking in justice and fidelity with my wife every day, or as a father, or I'm not. And so I've really learned that that's the core of this, and that's what this Bible study is going to help you understand, is how you as an individual, no matter what your profession, no matter what your vocation, can live that out. And the choices then that are attendant to that. How do I consume media in the 21st century? How do I parent my kids? How do I lead them in a way that is just, like God said to Abraham? You know, it's interesting, in Genesis, God said to Abraham, yeah, I'm going to give you the promised land. Your descendants are going to be like the stars in the heavens. But what I really want you to do, Abraham, is to train up your children in justice and righteousness so that they will follow me. So this is an issue that is really catching, on around the country. And I think, Kerby, real quick, there's a couple of reasons for that. One, young people are hungry for a message that is very practical and very relevant to their lives. The Barna Group has said there's a couple of reasons why millennials are leaving the church. And I know you talk a lot about this in the millennial generation. First one, we already talked about. First reason they leave is because churches seem overprotective. That's what Dan said. We try to protect our kids with respect to sex, usually by not talking about it, rather than equipping them and really answering their questions and being vulnerable as parents or as mentors. But another reason they're leaving is that we're not teaching things in a way that makes sense to them, and we're not giving them a whole picture. And usually that's related to human sexuality. Our views are simplistic and judgmental, and that drives away young people because that's not answering their questions. But when we start talking about the sexual union in the context of justice, when we start talking about the pursuit of purity being an act of love and justice that shapes culture, that starts to expand your horizons. And we've seen that with our college interns through our Pure Justice internship that's equipping kids across the country. And we're seeing that as they go through our Bible studies.
That's outstanding. Again, that is part of the justice leg on Pure Hope. So parenting justice. I wanted to spend a little bit more time before we run out of time on recovery, because this is where you are, and I want to hear from both of you, equipping Christians whose lives have been adversely affected by the sexualized culture, and there is hope. And I'd love to talk about that, Noel, first with you, but then also with Dan, because this recovery concept is something that is a hope that we are providing for individuals who are convinced perhaps that there is no hope for them, that they'll always be addicted to pornography, they'll always be a victim, and they'll never get true freedom in Christ. And you're really providing true hope through Pure Hope.
Yeah. Well, what you just mentioned there in those statements are basically the essence of the evil one's lies that really every one of us faces every day. You're never going to change. There is no hope. You're dirty. You should be ashamed of yourself. And it's what so many people in the church right now are struggling with because, as we are unfortunately so silent on the issue, we've got people who have been locked into years or decades of addiction, perhaps to pornography, or perhaps sexual abuse at a young age that they've never found healing from. And so that's what our resources are really attempting to do, is to help people take the first step in recovering from the effects of sexual sin, whether it's your own sin or whether it's somebody else's who harmed you in an unjust and unloving manner. So our recovery in a sexualized culture resource really is that bridge to the world of resources that are out there. One thing we've done is to make sure that at Pure Hope, we're very tight in what we're doing. We have this resource on our website at purehope.net, but the point of that is to give people a glimmer of hope in the redemption that is in Christ and then point them to other resources, because everyone has different needs in their recovery journey. For most people, that's going to involve an initial step of breaking the power of the secret. First in prayer, confessing, and then ultimately opening up with the things that you have not shared and that the evil one is keeping you locked up in shame and guilt on, with a safe person, and then moving towards a group, and then usually professional counseling with a Christian therapist who can help you move down this road of healing. And that road is there, and that's what our resource is all about, helping people see the stages of recovery from this. And it's so fundamental. That's why we think it's one of the three legs of our stool and what the church really needs, because as you talk about doing justice, you've got to talk about getting the victims of the injustice whole. I know people who are battling human trafficking in Asia, for example, and they're not only helping the women coming out, but they're seeing more and more men bound in addiction, usually from child abuse in their past or pornography addiction. And many people want to go help there, but you've got to get yourself whole. You have to be walking in a purity and a hope before you can really go help someone else. And so that's what our resources are designed to do.
We're going to take a break, and when we come back, I want to hear from Dan as well, because this is important if you're going to be a parent to model that, and certainly the recovery elements are the foundation, the addiction, the healing, and the community. We talked about that. We'll continue our conversation. Also talk about a few of the other resources that will be coming out through Purehope, and if you'd like to know more about this excellent organization and like to help them in one way or another gain the resources that they have available, you can go to our website, pointofview.net, and find that link, as we have provided that for you and some of the articles related to things that you find on their website. I think you're going to find this very helpful, and it's something that you need for your home, for your church, and for your community. Let's take a break. We'll continue our conversation with Noel Bouche and Dan Martin right after this.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Back for a few more minutes as we talk with our good friends from Purehope Ministries, purehope.net. Noel Bouche, President, Dan Martin, Director of Parenting Ministry. Dan, let me come to you for just a minute, because we were talking about earlier in the program how we as parents need to model a life of purity for our kids. We need to know how to engage our children and help them be able to engage the culture. But when I look at some of the statistics on your own website, where a majority of Christian men struggle with pornography, it seems to me it brings us back to that third step of recovery. We need to model biblical lives and lives of sexual purity, but we need to recover from some of the addictions that we have actually stumbled into.
Yeah, and living in a digital age, Kerby, is something that as parents we really need to be aware that our kids' brains are being wired differently. That's the impact of technology. That's the impact of being connected 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And parents need to be aware of that. It's one of the reasons why in our parenting resource we focus on technology. We really try to help parents create a plan in their home to limit the amount of screen time that their kids are exposed to help parents recognize what addiction looks like and to do some things along the way that will prevent that. And then going back, Kerby, to the whole discussion about our recovery ministry and how this ties in with parenting. What we need in this country, what we need in this world, is to recover our sexual identity. And that is what media, that is what culture is doing, is attacking our very identity. And that is so important for parents to recognize and understand that their kids, our kids' identity is under attack. And that is at the root of all of these issues. And that is why in our recovery resource, we focus on that. And in our parenting resource, we want to help parents understand that from the very beginning. I have churches all the time that we connect with that will call me and want to bring me in to speak to their high school parents or their junior high parents. And I always say to those pastors, man, get your elementary and your preschool parents there as well, because we need to understand that from a very early age, their identity is under attack. And we're seeing that play out in the culture that we live in. We're seeing sexual identity becoming a major issue and a major thing that churches need to understand, and churches need to be helping parents, helping individuals understand what is our identity in Christ. How do we recover that?
Outstanding. We just talked a while ago about your resource, Parenting in a Sexualized Culture. Noel, let me talk about the other resource that you have out, Recovery in a Sexualized Culture. Explain how, again, our listeners can use that in their homes and in their churches and their community.
Yeah, again, if you go to purehope.net, you'll see this resource, and I think the unique thing about it is it's a very easy entry point into a very complicated subject. Sexual addiction, there are libraries, thankfully, libraries of content now, explaining the neuroscience, explaining the nature of addiction. This is a bridge for you, and it's a very simple one as a first step. So it's broken down, again, into 4 sections that starts with the foundation. Just like our parenting resource and our justice content, you have to start with the foundation. What is human sexuality? Well, on the first page of the Bible, God made us male and female. That's the beginning of it. And then we hear on page 2 the sexual union, and it ends with a wedding feast. This idea of a sexual union and sexual identity as a male or female is fundamental. And usually those are the things that lead to addiction. I was talking to a ministry leader just the other day who's struggling with pornography and a long addiction. And we got to the root of it in a very simple conversation, just having a cup of coffee. And he said, I had a dad that was absent, and I never had someone who invested in my life as a male figure. And that wound I've filled with other things. That's usually part of someone's story. They've been hurt in one way or another, neglected, abandoned. So we understand the foundation that God made us male and female with the sexual urge and everything that goes along with that. But the next step is to understand what addiction is. And our brains, like Dan said, are being rewired in a digital age, and we're using a lot of these things to fill voids because we're so alienated in the 21st century. Community is gone. It's been blown up, and that's why the workplace sometimes can be the most dangerous place for a Christian marriage, because you're being thrown into a place with other people and taken away from your family. You're being thrown online with other people. In fact, a whole world that wants to show you something. I mean, look, I was just looking at CNN to see what's going on in Iraq right now, and on the sidebar, it's telling me here's a list of the 10 hottest women in the world, you know. That's the things that we have thrown at us every day, and so we see leaders across the country being sucked into that. But the next step, once you recognize what addiction is you find out how you heal. First, you break the power of the secret, you find safe relationships, and you end in community. It's community that is the answer, ultimately. And everybody has a different pathway to that. So if you go to our recovery resource, you're going to see at the end various links and resources that are going to take you on the next step in that journey. But I would just, Kerby, we don't have a call-in today. I would encourage anyone who's listening right now, if you're struggling with an addiction in the area of your sexuality, whether it's promiscuity, whether it is online behavior, whether it's consuming porn, break the power of that secret. There is hope. There is hope. And perhaps you've even been hurt in the church. Perhaps you've been hurt by someone who has said, you know what, you're never going to be pure again. I hear that all the time, and it goes back to what Dan said at the beginning, that we need to redefine our thought process here. I know a woman who said, you know, I got abused at age 12, and I told a pastor, and he said, you'll never be pure again. Well, that's because he was misdefining pure. Purity is the hope we have in Christ's redemption. It's something that is happening within us, and it will come to fruition when he redeems all things in their entirety. Nothing has been lost. And so we want to encourage people, and hopefully this print and downloadable resource will be a piece of community that some of your listeners need today, and we'll take them on the next step. But Kerby, I want to say again right now, I just thank you, because you're one of the leaders in this country who is opening up, and has faithfully for many, many years, this discussion where unfortunately we've been silent. And that's not an indictment on leadership or on anyone specifically. I've been silent in my own life in ways that have been harmful and contrary to the gospel. But we do have a habit of not talking about this. And you're raising this. You're giving people hope by bringing ministries like Purehope into this. And I hope today on this program, someone has heard something. You know, usually when God moves in us, this is an hour-long program, there's something that one line, one sentence, one word perhaps, that has resonated. And I hope that all of your listeners today got something, and especially for those people who are bound up in that shame, that every day you're facing the evil one coming at you saying you are dirty and there's no hope for you. The message of the gospel and the message of pure hope is that that is a lie, and the truth is that God loves you, you have been cleansed, you are being purified, and he loves you with an undying, steadfast love that will continue forever. So I just wanted to share that with your group, and I thank you, Kerby, for everything you're doing and how you're advancing Pure Hope in all of our engagement points with the Christian community.
Well, again, purehope.net, and we've had Noel Bouche and Dan Martin on today. When you have that film coming out, we want to get you back here, and we'll talk about it, and we'll get you in studio, but wanted to sexualize culture, and you do this through parenting, justice, and recovery. It's just been great to have both of you on the program today.
Thank you, Kerby.
Let's just, before we take a break, remind you that we are coming to the end of our fiscal year. And if you haven't had a chance to respond, I did want to mention that one more time, just before we come to the close of this hour, that it is crucial, of course, that we end our fiscal year on a strong financial footing. Here's some more comments.
Religious freedom is under attack in our nation. America was once a city of light sitting on a hill, but that light slowly dims under a cloud of governmental control. And under this cloud, our freedoms erode one day at a time. And nations like North Korea, the former Soviet Union, or Mao's China show us the startling consequences of nations where religious freedom is crushed by widespread governmental control. Will you join Point of View to create a world where the light shines brightly? Our fiscal year end is around the corner, and it's critical that we end the month of June on a solid financial foundation. A few of our key partners have generously contributed to a matching fund of $25,000. So when you give during this critical time, your gift will be matched up to $25,000. I ask you to join us in this important time and contribute to the good work which God has called Point of View to do. Together, we can make a powerful difference.
You can go to the website, pointofview.net. Of course, you can also write to us. It's a Point of View, Post Office Box 30, Dallas, Texas, 75221. If you appreciated the conversation we had today with Pure Hope and appreciate what we do here on the program, we would love to hear from you, and we are dependent upon your financial gifts, so anything you can do to help us out would be greatly appreciated. Let's take a break. We'll be back right after this.
across the nation. This is Point of View. For materials offered during the broadcast, please write to Point of View, Post Office Box 30. That's Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221. Zip 75221. Or call our toll-free number 1-800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries and is supported by your generous tax-deductible contributions.
I just thank God for y'all. I listen to you every day, truly. I wanted to thank y'all for everything you do each day to inform Christian families and our community about the things we can do, and just the way you're so informative. I listen to you daily and love you guys and appreciate you so much.
God bless you, Kerby, for keeping this show so on track and for the decades of wonderful help to this nation that Point of View has been. We're all big fans of your work, and we pray that God will just prosper it.
As a Christian, over the years that I've followed this program, I am constantly challenged to be on guard and to evaluate what's going on. And if for no other reason, to protect the caliber and the truth of your programming, I need to participate and to back your program financially to ensure that the truth stays out there for people to hear, to view, and to be a part of.
This is Point of View Radio.